Not in a statement, but relevant to the Commission's terms of reference. I want to do that by firstly referring you to the Public Protector's report. You will find it on page 400 of Exhibit L1. You will see it runs from page 400 until page 449. Firstly, do you confirm that you were interviewed by the Public Protector?
Yes, by officials from her department.
Yes, from officials from the department, yes. And that transcript that I've directed you captures what was discussed between yourself and the officials of the Public Protector.
Correct.
May I then refer you to page 405. With particular reference to line number 6 up until line 13. To save time, I'll just read it to you very quickly.
Sorry, what is the page number again? I think I've...
405.
405?
Yes, 405. Page
sorry,
405.
Okay, yes, I've got it, sorry. Page, line?
Line 6 to line 13. I'll just read it to you, read it on the record very quickly. That's where you are being asked, okay, all right, we were saying what happened when you left. You answer, well, what happened when I left is that. Then the reason why, well, the president removed me. Line 10, yes, yeah, and what happened? And importantly, on line 13, you say, I don't know why he removed me, so it is difficult to say. Before the Public Protector, that's what you indicated. Now, I just need you to clarify that aspect in line with your evidence before the chair, where you seemed to be furnishing reasons as to what might have led to the president removing you.
Chair, I have no knowledge of why the president removed me, but I have my own speculation, and that's what I meant. I don't have knowledge.
Yes. Now, may I refer you to page 415.
Yes.
You will see on line 9, the following, it's recorded as part of your answer. You say there was a whole lot of them. The board accepted the president's proposal that Marocha come back and a commission of inquiry be done. And then lo and behold, Marocha visited the president and said he is not accepting it. And we know that in this, your evidence before this commission, you did not really talk about the commission of inquiry, and that evidence becomes quite ambiguous. Do you wish to clarify that?
The commission of inquiry, it's correct that there's ambiguity there. It's given capital letters. What I really meant was that there would be an inquiry which would run under my supervision.
What you meant by inquiry, are you saying what you meant by inquiry was the role that you were contemplated to play in terms of the president's proposal?
Correct.
Yes, okay, all right.
Yes.
I'm not a lawyer, so these things are...
Yes, that's
well, it might well have entailed an inquiry, but it might not have entailed, so it just depends.
Correct,
so
correct.
You might not be wrong.
And may I then refer you to page 444?
Well, before you go there, Mr. Mkwena, just going back to the issue of the reasons for dismissal, you have been asked in relation to page 405. You don't have to go back to that page, but you may as well also clarify a paragraph that I think is somewhere towards the end of your statement. I think it is paragraph 108. Do you want to just read that paragraph into the record?
It is my firm belief, it's not my firm knowledge, it is my firm belief that my resistance to the strong views of President Zuma in relation to the appointment of certain preferred candidates to the positions of CEO and members of board directors, including the CEO and chairperson of Transnet, at the time that I was minister, led him to the conclusion that I would not do his bidding and behave improperly and unlawfully. I believe it was for that reason I was dismissed by President Zuma. Yes.
Now, different words might mean different things to different people. I think that when one reads that paragraph, it seems to reflect your belief as to why you were removed from the position of Minister of Public Enterprises.
Yes.
And yet, in the passage that Mr. Mokoena referred you to in the transcript before the public protector, you say you don't know why you were removed, and and earlier on you did, in fairness, say you can only speculate.
Sure.
So I think that you may need to try and make us understand these different things. You may be meaning one and the same thing, using different words. You may be meaning different things. But I think when one reads paragraph 108, one seems to get that you do have a belief as to why you were dismissed.
Yes.
You are not saying that's what you were told, but it's your own belief.
Yes.
But my own impression is that a belief might be different from speculation, but I may be wrong. You might be thinking it's the same thing. For me, a speculation seems to be much lighter than a belief. But you are not a lawyer, and so. But I just think that it would be fair for you to apply your mind and to be able to explain that.
Okay. In terms of the interview with the Public Protector's Office, when I look at the context and whatever, they're asking me what happened, and then what happened. If someone had to come to me immediately thereafter and said, why did the president remove you? I'd say, I don't know, because no explanation was given. So I have no I was given no reason. But when I was able to reflect, and when I was able to look at what subsequent events took place, as Mr. Gordon often said, connect the dots. It appeared to me that there might have been further reasons why there might have been stronger reasons than just disliking me or seeing me as sorting me from my position. But that is speculation. But I must say that in light of all that has surfaced, I would say I do believe that that was part of his reasons. That particularly when I look at the Siyabonga Gama issue, that the president removed me. I believe it, I can't state it as a fact.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And lastly, in relation to the public protector's transcript, may I refer you to page 444?
Sorry?
444.
444.
444. With particular reference to line 19, to page 445, line 4. Are you there?
Page line?
444, line 19.
Yes.
I'll read it for it to you up until page 445, line 4. The following is recorded in that passage. The board of ESCOM was replaced. That was a sad story. Mpho Makwana, who I think is one of our most superb, and the question is posed, the one you had that you appointed to chair, your answer is, I appointed and then he remained as chair, and Brian, whatever was appointed, Damas, was appointed as CEO. They were all removed. The ESCOM board, all my boards were removed, and he was just removed just like that by Malusi Gigaba. I saw him afterwards, and he said, open quotes, Barbara, you will not believe what happened to me. Malusi just removed me like that. Then a couple of weeks later, I get a call from the president, who calls me in and then says, you know, I must apologize. Malusi did that without me knowing. Some of that evidence was not clearly captured in your evidence before this commission, and it appears to be some of the important facts that you related to the public protector or her officials. Could you please, ventilate on those issues?
Okay. When we talk about boards being replaced and whatever, I'm not talking that immediately when Minister Gigaba was in the next month, all the boards were removed. That's incorrect. And that ambiguity, I accept, is probably there. But there was, at that time, as things progressed, that people were removed from boards. The most unfortunate situation happened the most unfortunate of which I think was SAA. I had appointed an SAA board very early on in June 2009, I think it was. And it was a very good board, and that's not for my own, but it was very good quality, high caliber people. And I know that the president afterwards came to me and said he was very upset that a cabinet memo on SAA went to the board and went to cabinet, and he wasn't present at cabinet. That was the first indication I ever had. But anyway, after I left, the board's tenure still was 1 or 2 years. I can't remember the exact dates. And of course, a board, in anticipation of an AGM, would want to know of a minister, what is the position, these people want to move on, the board assists the minister about who's wanting to go on, who would stay if recommended by the minister, what shortages we have. And they never got an answer from Mr. Gigaba. And finally, the term of office expired without their term being extended by the minister. And so they all had to resign en masse.
One sec, Ms. Hogan. Mr. Mkwena, of course, in an inquiry such as this, a certain amount of hearsay is permissible, but it must really be necessary.
Yes.
It doesn't look like some of these things are things that the witness has personal knowledge of.
Ms. Hogan, that last paragraph on page 445, were you recording to the public protector your conversation that you had with Mr. Damas?
Mr. Kwana, Mr. Makwana.
Mr. Makwana, yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes, that is correct, but it is hearsay what he told me, yeah.
Yes, okay. But in relation to the boards that were removed, that is what you experienced and you are able to talk about before this commission?
You know, it would require a fair amount of just going back and respect, you know, of just tabling the details, because there's 17, 18 people on a board, who stayed on, who moved on. You know, it's a matter of detail, yes. Yeah.
That's fair. Now, can we move on to some of the issues which I needed that I need to converse with you? Have you, either in your official capacity or non-official capacity, encountered or met with the Gupta's family?
Chair, in 2004, Issa Pahat, in whose home Mr. Kathrada, my partner, Mr. Kathrada spent a lot of time as a young child because he had to come to school in Johannesburg. Issa Pahat phoned Kathy and I and said, would we come to dinner for luncheon with some friends of his? And so we went to this luncheon. This was in holiday time in Constantia, and there were other people there, but apparently the Guptas were there. It was the first time I'd ever known of them or met them. We had nothing to say to them, really. We were talking to other people, and that was that. That was in 2004. Do you want me to go on to, and then there was an occasion.
Maybe let's stick to that occasion in 2004. Were there any discussions that you held with the Guptas? Were there any offers that were made to you or to Kathy?
No, we had lunch and then we left. We didn't stay on an extended stay there.
Yes. And then the next occasion?
The next occasion was sometime after that. It was after I was a minister.
After you have now left from?
After I was finished as a minister, the High Commission of India invited Mr. Kathrada and, as I recall, some of the Pahat family and some members of the Kathrada Foundation for a luncheon to meet with a cabinet minister from India, who also happened to be an anti-apartheid activist in India during that time and knew both Cassie and myself. And we had lunch there, and about 2/3 through the lunch, R.J. Gupta arrived. But he went and sat by a table by himself, and he appeared to be in a very filthy mood, spoke to no one, and just glared at all of us.
So there were never any other offers or engagement with Mr. Gupta,
No.
A.J. Gupta at the time?
No.
Now, I need to move on also to deal with the Gupta leaked emails with reference to an allegation that you might have been a beneficiary of a trip that was sponsored by the Guptas. And I do so by referring you to pages 376 to page 381.
Chair, I got the shock of my life a while back, about 6 months ago, I can't remember exactly, when I got a telephone call from one of the journalists who'd been investigating the Gupta leaks and said, tell me about the trip that the Gupta sponsored for you and Mr. Kathrada. And I was like stunned. And so I then went into the records that are held by the Kathrada Foundation of Mr. Kathrada's travel. And this documentation that is here before us is exactly what the Kathrada Foundation had. Now, this was after I was a minister. This was in July. Well, Mr. Kathrada was invited by the South African High Commission in India and several other agencies. One was the Gandhi Peace Foundation, the United Nations Informatics Center, India International Center.
You may turn to page 381.
That's 381. That's on page 381. It's just the last paragraph before I sign off on the letter. This is my response to the journalist Richard Poplak, who queried this letter. So let me start at the beginning with that letter. It's confirmed by the evidence. So we were invited by the India International Center, the Gandhi Peace Foundation, the South African High Commission, the United Nations Informatics Center, and the Working Group on International Strategies. And they invited Mr. Kathrada to come and address various bodies, particularly schools and university students, to commemorate the birthday of President Mandela and to speak of Mr. Mandela and the struggle and whatever. Mr. Kathrada was oftentimes asked to do that, and he was often requested by President Mandela to take on certain matters. So we were invited, and that was our understanding, and our understanding was at the initiative of the South African High Commission. So, I mean, we flew late on the 15th of July. We got into Mumbai on the 16th, the following morning, early, and then we traveled on to Delhi. We were there for 2 days. Mr. Kathrada spoke to a number of schools. There's a press report on it on page 382, where it was 18 schools that he had spoken to. And we flew back on the 19th, the day after. So we were there for a day or two. The Indian High Commission had informed the Kathrada Foundation that they were organizing the trip, and they sent on the flight reservations, and we sent a request to them if the flight reservations, the timing, could not be changed, because it was very exhausting for Mr. Kathrada to fly to Dubai, then fly on to, as it just stopped there in the airport, fly on to Mumbai, and then fly on to Delhi. It's a very long night for him. And the answer we got from the Indian High Commission is
page
on
385? Is that page 385?
Page 385.
Is that the one?
Page 385, and it's to Zora Errington, who was Mr. Kathrada's PA, and his niece, who managed all Mr. Kathrada's logistical and whatever. And the High Commission writes to Zora and says, "Dear Zora, below is a reservation for Dr. Kathrada and Ms. Hogan. As I discussed with them on the telephone, the mission had stipulated that we would prefer a more time-friendly routing and that they should depart on Friday evening. However, the company that was assisting with this reservation indicated that this was the best they can do. We've requested for the e-tickets and will mail to you upon receipt."
And the name of the company, it's not indicated.
Well, the name of the company was not indicated, you know, we just thought the commission does what the commission usually does. So they then emailed the e-tickets, and the travel agency is a travel agency in Mayfair called Flywell Travel, and it has the details of our journey.
You may turn to page 377.
377, that's...
that the-
Yes. So, you know, we didn't think to question anything further, and Mr. Kathrada was not keen for us to pressure any further the travel arrangements. In fact, he was a little bit put out that I'd actually requested, being a gentleman that he was, he would say to me, Barbara, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth, you know. You don't get invited and you say, yes, we'll come, but, you know, we don't like the arrangements that you made. He just thought that was impolite, and of course he's correct. So we left it at that. But when I looked at the travel arrangements, it was Jet Airways. And I thought, oh my gosh, are we going to be captured on flight and me be forced to retrospectively sign off? And the only indication, which we wouldn't have known at the time, that this had anything to do with the Gupta family, is in the small forwarding email of the record of who was copied in. And there it says, from Nafisa, from the travel agent, to Ashu. And it says ashu@sahara.coza. Now,
Are you referring now to
page 377. If you just look at that email, the passage of the email, it says ashu@sahara.co.za. Now, we weren't looking at who was being emailed by the travel agency. In retrospect, it's obviously Ashu, Chawla, and that's what it was Daily Maverick. The journalist, the investigative journalist, wanted an explanation from us. So I forwarded all of this to them and explained that we didn't know at the time that this was the situation, and he then replied...
May I refer to page 386?
386, and he said, thank you, Barbara. We've all agreed that this isn't a story worth pursuing. That said, I think it's interesting, and I want to thank you for following up on it. I'll let you know if you and Cassie pop up in any emails or documents, the small stuff becomes searchable. You know, I was worried that Cassie, people would try to compromise Cassie. So I just said, please let me know if anything else, and we can investigate and give an honest answer. So it's a surprising twist to a long saga that Jet Airways managed to fly us to Mumbai. And, but that was the extent of our involvement there.
Other than this reference here, did you get to know of anything that may have reflected that there was some connection between Jet Airways and maybe the Gupta family or their companies?
No. No. I hadn't heard the evidence of Fehimento with the Guptas claiming that they were in a partnership with this company. You know, that only came out now recently. So I didn't know that, yeah.
Well,
there's also a, sorry.
Yeah, not just add what you want to add.
There's also a major company in India, a huge company, unrelated to the Guptas, that is called Sahara, and there's an airline called Sahara.
Well, the interesting thing is that while Ms. Mentor said in her evidence that at the meeting that she says she had with Mr. Ajay Gupta in October 2010, She says Mr. Ajay Gupta talked about Jet Airways and seemed to be said something that suggested that there was a connection between him or the family with Jet Airways in an affidavit that he has signed in support of his application for leave to cross-examine Ms. Mento. He has said that there is absolutely no connection, as far as I can recall his affidavit, between, or there was at the time, no connection between Jet Airways and the Gupta family.
I cannot comment.
Of course, you wouldn't be able to comment on that.
No. There would have to be an investigation to
Yeah.
see here.
Do you know who paid for the trip?
Well, I don't know who paid for everything. The evidence here, although it's not clear who paid, because there's nothing that says this person paid, but certainly in the email string, Ashu Chawla from Sahara, South Africa, the Gupta's company, is copied in or forwarded this thing.
Now, Ms. Hogan, at the end of this commission, the chairperson will have to make certain recommendations, and your evidence and other evidence of other witnesses, I'm sure, will be taken into account in order to guide the chair as to the recommendations that should be made in order to avoid the issues that we have conversed with you and with other witnesses. You have made a request before we deal with further recommendations that you be permitted to read, and with the indulgence from the chair, your conclusion, paragraphs starting from page 22, paragraph 102 to page 24, paragraph 109.
Yes.
Is that still your request?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, with the indulgence.
Yes, you may do so.
Okay. So the conclusion of my evidence before you, Chair, is that the legal framework for the appointment of boards of SOEs and hence the CEOs of SOEs is comprehensively set out in the opinion of Michael Katz of Edward Nathan Sonnenbergs, as well as Advocate Wim Trengrove. Suffice to say that this information was conveyed to President Zuma on a number of occasions, including in my memorandum to President Zuma on the 28th of July, wherein I state the following in paragraph 3.1.8. This was also confirmed, and this is a quote, this was also confirmed by senior counsel's advice, which is attached as Annexure A. This is Annexure A to the report that I gave to the President. Council advised that the Minister is the functionary who holds the shares and exercises the rights on behalf of the state. The Minister's exercise of the shareholder rights is part of her exercise of the state's executive powers. If Cabinet has formulated policy relating to such exercise, then the Minister should exercise the powers within the parameters of such policy. The Minister is not obliged to consult Cabinet in the exercise of his or her power, but may choose to do so as a matter of personal discretion or any protocol or custom developed in this regard. Council advised that the Minister's exercise of her shareholder powers on behalf of the state remain valid in law, even if the Minister does not adhere to any Cabinet policy developed on this issue. Close quote. Paragraph 103. The facts set out above bear testimony to my repeated and unsuccessful attempts to appoint a CEO at Transnet over 1.5 years, as well as appointments to those of the board, which attempts by the board to appoint a CEO of Transnet had commenced some time prior to my appointment as a minister. The conduct of President Zuma and certain members of his cabinet in relationship to Transnet and Eskom was not only negligent, it was reckless and designed to frustrate the sincere attempts of the boards of their state-owned entities to exercise their fiduciary duties as directors and the exercise of sound corporate governance in their respective state-owned entities. The above course of conduct by President Zuma in relationship to Transnet and Eskom was improper and irregular. His conduct revealed, at best, a fundamental misunderstanding and misconception of his role as President of South Africa and the exercise of his presidential duties and functions. His actions not only undermined me as the minister responsible for public enterprises, but undermined the efforts of the boards of Transnet and Eskom and many of their senior management who attempted to carry out their responsibilities and duties in a professional manner under very, very trying circumstances. It is not for me to speculate as to what the motives of President Zuma were in unduly and improperly influencing the appointment of CEOs and board directors in certain of the state-owned entities referred to above. Suffice to say, in my view, the actions set out above resulted in severe and extremely detrimental consequences for Transnet and Eskom, which consequences undermined and broke the morale of boards, staff and management, and also resulted in severe reputational damages to these entities and negative consequences for their efficient functioning. It is submitted that the nature of the interventions described by me in Transnet and Eskom manifested the beginnings of the President and certain members of his cabinet unduly influencing the appointments of key executives and board members in state-owned enterprises. We now know that this course of conduct escalated over the years and has resulted in a litany of maladministration, abuse of resources, and theft from state-owned entities in South Africa. The consequences of such actions are public knowledge, as of the disastrous economic effects on the state of the South African economy. They are the reason for this commission of inquiry. Once there is a collusion between the CEO of a state-owned entity and the chairperson of the board of that state-owned entity, in order to influence the conduct of business of that entity, particularly the allocation of contracts and tenders, the decline and effects thereof will be felt for years to come. It is my firm belief that my resistance to the strong views of President Zuma in the relation to the appointment of certain preferred candidates to the positions of CEO and members of boards of directors, including the CEO and chairperson of Transnet, at the time that I was minister, led him to the conclusion that I would not do his bidding and behave improperly and unlawfully. I believe it was for that reason I was dismissed by President Zuma as Minister of Public Enterprises on the 31st of October, 2010. I would like to place it on record that while my resistance to the attempts of President Zuma to improperly influence the appointments of CEOs and boards of directors at SOEs may have had a significant negative effect on my own career, what I deeply regret is that the actions of President Zuma and others during the course of the Transnet and Eskom sagas, as set out in detail above, also had a significant negative impact on the careers and reputations of a number of fine South Africans who were only attempting to fulfill their responsibilities in terms of their appointments in the entities referred to above.
And these are some of the considerations that you seek the chair to take into consideration when preparing his recommendations.
Correct.
Now, while we are still dealing with the recommendations and the experiences that the lessons that we may gain from your experiences, could you clarify, for me as to when the candidates of the boards are appointed or when the CEO is appointed, Do we know if at all times a conflict of interest is conducted?
I cannot say for sure on that.
And the second one, do you know whether a lifestyle audit is conducted?
No.
On those candidates?
Not in my experience. There was never a lifestyle audit.
And in instances whereby there might be declarations made by the board members, would that be sufficient in instances whereby the companies where they hold interest are tendering? Would it be sufficient for them to simply declare, or something more must be done?
You know, I think the appointment of directors need to go through a far more rigorous process. The process was fairly rigorous in DPE, but when I look in retrospect and I look at the advice given in the handbook for the appointment of persons to boards of state-controlled enterprises that was approved by Cabinet in 2008, and other international literature, the kind of scrutiny which is envisaged these days for the appointments to important state-owned enterprises is very, very strong, that scrutiny. It goes from, it extends to even setting up a nominations committee that is independent, that would interview potential candidates, would investigate any possibilities of conflicts of interest, of histories of the person, etc., but also look at the suitability of the candidate for the position, but not only the suitability of an individual candidate, but for the requirements of the board. And somehow we do need to insulate the process of appointing directors from undue interferences from business quarters, from political party quarters, from anyone who tries to influence with malfeasance. And so there needs to be a very rigorous process in which the public has confidence, and we need to up our game in this regard. I also think that the board, as the board that might be outgoing, or some of them might be outgoing, do have an advisory role to play here. Unless there is strong evidence that the board has not performed, or there is some reason to believe that the board is not acting in the best interests of the company. But I do believe that the board plays an advisory role. They know, they've had the experience. We cannot afford to lose the institutional knowledge. But the board should not be the single advisory or play the single most important role in future board appointments. Some bodies even recommend that specialist agencies, representative from specialist agencies might be requested, when you assemble that board that investigates, might be requested to do so. Chair, we can put in a lot more, and the literature is abundant on this matter. But there's one issue: we can put in a lot of guidelines, we can put in a lot of rules, procedural, and those are good. In the way that the King report still remains not enforceable by law, but the standing that it has means that every company consults that report as as a guidance on good corporate governance. And we all know that South Africa's companies receive glowing reports on the whole, on listed on the stock exchange, on their adherence to corporate governance. But at the end of the day, any nominations committee do need to interrogate the values and the ethics and motives for any person who is nominated and put forward to sit on a board. Because if a person does not have a set of values which understands that the primary responsibility of a board member is the health of the company will suffer, and South Africa will suffer. So there must be a role for a measured nominations committee to probe those aspects in a person's history, in a person's approach now, motivation, whatever. So yes, I do think, one, the rigorous selection of board members. I do think board evaluations, we know that we are supposed to do self-evaluations when we sit on a board. That's one of King's major proposals. I don't think we've developed a rigorous enough framework for SOEs. SOEs are in a difficult situation. They do not have the freedom to operate as a public company would. You know, they are obliged to take government's objectives into account. And I think an honest appraisal that we need to research ways, not research, but also ask assistance for the ways that boards evaluate themselves and the way that a minister or whoever is the shareholder, how they can effectively monitor a board and the performance of a company.
Yes.
Now that is one of the issues, Chair, the evaluation of the performance of a company. We were diligent. We had quarterly reporting from each company. We would look at the results. But bear in mind, you're asking a single department to have within its ranks professional expertise who cannot easily have the wool drawn over their eyes. Professional expertise that cover energy, transport, airlines, telecommunications, forestry, nuclear energy. I mean, it's a wider range of skills. And I do think government needs to look at the shareholder role. Who is best placed to play that role? Is it a single department? It was almost a default that the public enterprises was set up in the handover from the Nationalist Party government to the ANC government. It was all of these entities that were corporatized and, you know, it was all put into one department. Finally, I would like to say the insulation from political interference is extremely important. The international literature mentions that one of the greatest risks that state-owned enterprises face is political interference in the execution of their duties. And I must say that in my experience, when I saw what happened to executives who found themselves on the receiving end of power plays by different groupings in the ruling party, who would have a different minister bestowed, you know, every 2 years or so, with differing mandates and whatever, the level of disillusionment and demoralization is huge. When you are the shareholder, you have to be the shareholder that acts with consistency, fairness, and firmness. The shareholders' compact needs to be an instrument that we need to up. Is that the only mechanism that we have at our disposal for the relationship between government and a state-owned enterprise? And then there are other stakeholders who seldom have a voice in all of this. I think particularly of PRASA, which wasn't under my domain, but it provides passenger rail service. And it is one of the most painful things for all of us to see how badly serviced and how risky passenger rail is becoming now. Some countries recommend that a member of the union sits on the board or something like that. I am not entirely in favor, because often what happens then is that worker representative can become captured on the board or mistrusted because that person's got to go along with unpopular board decisions. But I think for major stakeholders, there must be an avenue for opinions to be heard. So I could say a lot more, but I know that the evidence leader, that there are two documents in particular which I think would be enormously helpful to yourselves. And sorry, just finally, one of the things is actually establishing once and for all, what is the authority of the president, what is the authority of cabinet, what is the authority of a minister, et cetera, in relationship to board appointments and stewardship of state-owned enterprises. I could find no recognizable practice or understanding. And it was a matter of legal opinion only that I could rely on. There should no longer be a legal opinion. It should, if we disagree with that legal opinion, that is fine. But we have to set up a far better understanding of the powers and the limits of authority in that regard.
Yes.
Thank you.
You said you could say more. I would like you to be able to ensure that the Commission has got all that you may not have said, which you consider important. There are two ways in which this may be done. One might be to allow you more time to speak more, but I do want to say that it may be that I should give you an opportunity, if it is something you would like to do, to prepare a written document that captures what you would put up as your suggestions to be considered for recommendations by the Commission. Take your time, do something as comprehensive as you want. I do intend in due course to make an announcement in terms of which I would like to have various organizations, including political parties and civic organizations and maybe churches, a lot of organizations and formations within the country where I would invite them to begin, if they are interested, to do whatever work may be necessary for them to later on, closer to the end of the work of the commission, submit their recommendations on a number of things, or their suggestions on what recommendations the commission should consider in relation to a number of things, including the issue of state capture, including the issue of what should be done to try and minimize the levels of corruption in the country, because I consider that this commission is a special opportunity for all South Africans to make a contribution so that the commission could come up with recommendations that are the product of the collective wisdom of South Africans who would like these issues not to arise again in the future if possible, or at least if they arise to be at a minimal level. So I'm thinking, reading your body language, it looks like you might prefer the idea of putting up a document.
Chair, I'm very honored that you ask that of me. I certainly would try and assist in every way. I will not put this commission through another 7 days hearing of my voice. Yeah.
Yes. So do that and just remain in touch with the commission's legal team or the secretariat, so that once you are ready to send it, you can send it to the commission.
Sure.
Thank you.
Ms. Hogan, in line with what you were testifying on the recommendations, should we not also learn from what is happening today? I mean, we know that today the interviews of the NDPP, for the NDPP position, are being held publicly, and they are subject to public scrutiny. Wouldn't that assist when it comes to the appointments of boards, also the appointments of CEO?
Yeah. You know, the question of public hearings, transparency is also very good. And I would not say immediately, yes, it should be transparent, but I tend towards that, but there can be other arguments. I did learn one thing in Parliament. I was in the process with, we were processing the Municipal Finance Management Act. And in that act, as a committee, we were proposing a clause that councillors and mayors not be involved at all in procurement matters. And I received a huge backlash from a whole number of mayors. And they came down in a delegation and wanted to meet with me about why that was outrageous that I should suggest that. So I said to them, no, I'm not going to meet with you privately. What I want you to do is to come to Parliament tomorrow and state your case before the South African public, because at that stage those meetings were on television, and state your case and argue your case so that we can all as South Africans understand it. Not a single mayor came forward. And so transparency often can be a means of rooting out people with, and I'm not saying they had bad motivations, they probably were looking at, at other matters. But I do think transparency is important. One thing that I have not included is the question of whistleblowers. Probably the most damaging of the people most damaged are whistleblowers. And Chair, we put in, I think it was in the Public Financial Management Act, a clause that said, if a civil servant is instructed by a minister to do something illegal, And that civil servant must then write back, and it must be in writing, why that civil servant finds that it can't do it, it's illegal, but must then inform the Auditor General. And I think our whistleblowers need considerable assistance. It's been painful to see what's been happening to our whistleblowers, you know, or people who are trying to stand firm and who are being badgered. And then, of course, the big discussion is within the business community. How are they conducting themselves? It's not just government, it's those in business. All these practices that come out, and the notion that you can get a fee just because you introduce someone to the minister. I mean, where does that come from?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, if I've heard you correctly, you know, from your evidence, at some point you did also refer us to the Constitution, and you also read one of the clauses in the Constitution. And I want to understand your evidence, whether how one would be able to make the recommendation in line with the Constitution. Is it not important to also have, you know, the values, the basic values and principles governing the public administration as captured in Section 195 of the Constitution? Mm-hmm. And you also have Section 96 of the Constitution. I want to read it to you. It's a very short section, and tell me how do you think it will assist.
Yeah.
Section 96 says that members of cabinet and deputy ministers must act in accordance with a code of ethics prescribed by national legislation. 2, members of the cabinet and deputy ministers may not, A, undertake any other paid work, act in any way that is inconsistent with their office, or expose themselves to any situation involving the risk of a conflict between their official responsibilities and private interest. C, use their position or any information entrusted to them to enrich themselves or improperly benefit any other person.
Those are very good, extremely good guidelines from the, not guidelines, well, clauses from the Constitution. My worry is that the Executive Ethics Act at the moment is not strong enough to reflect, I think, what the Constitution envisaged. But certainly, the sentiments expressed there are what we all would subscribe to in the Constitution.
Yes. And in Annexure D of your witness statement, it is to be found on page 53. You don't have to go there. I'll summarize what it says. That is the memorandum which you sent to the ex-president dated the 28th July 2009. On page 57, paragraph 3.12, you make reference to the handbook on the appointment of person to serve on the boards of state-controlled institution. And would that be one of the documents which the chair must take cognizance to when he makes a recommendation?
Absolutely. This handbook, when I reread it now, it's probably one of the most interesting and thoughtful and well-structured handbooks that's on corporate, on the appointment of persons. And I only received a summarized version as a minister. I never received the full version. And when I see the full version now, I wished I'd had it at that time.
And that handbook, Mr. Chair, is to be found on the second file, page 450 to page 510. You also referred to literature in your statement to say that it is international literature on SOEs. And you attach also to your statement from page 511, and that document runs up until page 624. It's a document by the OECD. Can you please tell the chair what is your encounter with that international organization, OECD? Link it with the time when you were still the Minister of Public Enterprises.
Chair, the OECD runs very useful training courses on corporate governance, also in state-owned enterprises. And during my tenure as minister, two of my staff members, one who was very senior in the legal department, attended those. And their advice subsequent to going to those courses were invaluable. And the OECD issued this document, which you've referred to, on boards of directors of state-owned enterprises. I think they issued it in 2013 or so. And it's almost like a King report, but for international. And it provides, I think, thoroughly useful, in as far as I've been able to peruse it in detail, extremely useful guidelines and insights into other countries. And that's probably what the Commission would also want to look at, is how is this done in other countries? What have been their experiences?
May I refer to page 515 of the document? And in order to appreciate the importance of the document and your testimony on it, can you please read the foreword of the document?
This report provides practical guidance on board practices for directors of state-owned enterprises and identifies a number of good practices based on national experiences of a large number of participating countries. It extends the guidance provided by Chapter 6 of the OECD Guidelines on Corporate Governance on State-Owned Enterprises, and this is on the responsibilities of boards of state-owned enterprises. The report draws information from a questionnaire-based exercise, as well as previous publications and background papers commissioned by the OECD. The report is an outcome of the OECD Working Party on State Ownership and Privatization Practices project called Enhancing the Role of the Boards of Directors of State-Owned Enterprises. It was given final approval and declassified by the WPSOPP, I don't understand who those are, in December 2012. The draft report was prepared by Sarah Sultan and Hans Christiansen of the Corporate Affairs Division of the OECD Directorate for Financial and Enterprise Affairs. Substantive input was also provided by Jim Colvin, acting as an external consultant to the OECD. The development of the report has also benefited from comprehensive consultations with the Business and Industry Advisory Committee, the Trade Union Advisory Committee, civil society, academia, and OECD partner economies.
So this is quite a useful document to look at. Now, you mentioned the date. If you can look at on page 514.
Yes.
And then it provides you with the date of 2013.
Yes, right at the bottom.
Yes.
OECD 2013, yes.
Now, lastly, and this is lastly now concluding on your evidence, I need to refer you to link your evidence with the evidence of Dr. Hellman and Dr. Kaufman, who have testified before the Commission. And if you may refer to a document, their evidence, Mr. Chair, was Exhibit GL. You don't have to go there. I will, for convenience, ask Ms. Hogan to read only 3 paragraphs on page 41. Are you there? It must be written on top, Dr. Holman, Kaufman, and it's page 41. And paragraph 4 thereof, it's headed State-Owned Enterprise Reform. If you may, as a parting shot to this commission, simply read in paragraph 40, 41, and 42 and comment whether do you agree with what they are saying in those paragraphs.
Yes, I do agree.
But
do you want me to read it?
Read them first, yes.
Huh?
Read them first into the record.
Okay. Paragraph 40, state-owned enterprises can be used to cement the ties between politicians and private actors. As such, they are often the critical transmission mechanisms through which state capture occurs. Though traditionally state-owned enterprises are often seen as potential vehicles for fostering the state's interests, there are also risks that powerful state-owned firms use their close relationships to state actors to shape laws, policies, and regulations in their own interest. Moreover, the murky boundaries between the ownership and control rights in state-owned enterprises can give leeway to managers to manipulate their ties to the state for their own interests. As a result, to prevent state capture emanating from state-owned enterprises, there needs to be a clear separation of the management of state-owned companies and politics. And this is particularly important in key sectors such as energy, extractives, and finance. Government's nominations of professional management should be subject to independent, high-level commissions driven by meritocratic and professional objectives, and also considered by the Parliament to ensure its independence from external pressure.
Is that in line with what you were informing the chair?
Yes.
Proceed.
The question of Parliament's role, I think, is not clear here, and I think that role also needs to be clarified.
Yes.
With that reservation, yeah.
Paragraph 42.
While exhaustive recommendations to address capture in state-owned enterprises is not our objective here, related measures to illustrate the need for reforms include the empowerment of professional independent boards, as I said, which should also be selected through a meritocratic process, emphasizing technical expertise over political patronage. Further, ensuring transparency and oversight by a disclosure of revenues, costs, revenue flow between state-owned enterprises and the state, disclosing data on production, plans, trading activity, as well as quasi-fiscal activities. Independent financial audits and an effective level of legislative oversight are also very important. Well, we do have an independent audit function at times.
And you do
yes.
agree to the sentiments echoed by the experts in those paragraphs?
Yes, yes.
Mr. Chair, that concludes the evidence of Ms. Hogan, unless there are further questions from the chair.
No, thank you very much. I've asked my questions as we were going along. Thank you, Mr. Mkwena. Ms. Hogan, thank you very much once again for coming forward to assist the commission. We really appreciate it. And thank you also for remaining for 3 days instead of one that was envisaged.
Yeah.
Thank you for all your evidence and the further work that you are going to do. When it's ready, you will send it to the commission, and it would be taken into account together with any other suggestions and ideas that will come from various organizations and South Africans towards the end of the work of the commission. But thank you very much once again, and you are excused.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, can Can I thank you for the way that you've presided over this with fairness and insight, and to the team, the evidence leader, Advocate Mokoena, who's been so meticulous and thoughtful in helping me to present my evidence, and of course my legal team sitting there. Chair, I just want to say one thing. You know, when I joined the ANC, and in all the years that I've been there, I've always felt that it's been a great privilege to be a participant in the great movements of history and to be associated at the time with an organization that embodied fine values. I don't have it here with me, but I think of the quotation that Mr. Kathrada is always quoted on his experience on Robben Island and how he thought we should look upon it. And he said, it really is a triumph over punishment. It's a triumph. Their release, their whole response was it was a triumph over small minds. It was a triumph over evil. And that we move forward on that. And those are the values of the ANC, not only because he was my husband, but in many ways he embodied, and a lot of other people still do, embodied the values. I'm not talking about just an organization, I'm talking about the values. We're starved for the truth. This country is really hungry, thirsting for justice. And this commission is probably giving us, will in history be seen as a turning point in which we will be enormously proud, as in a way that so many South Africans didn't allow all of this to just run away and take its own course. That under incredible conditions, we've been able to start turning it around. And this commission, I think, is playing such an important role in allowing South Africans to believe once again that there can be hope and to believe that things can come right. And I have no doubt, and I wish the commission and everybody who's been putting all their energies here, the best of wishes and thank yous from the people of South Africa for the work that you're doing, and I'm sure the personal sacrifices that it has meant. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Ms. Hogan, for those words, and I thank you on behalf of everybody in the commission, all of whom appreciate your words. I also I have no doubt from the interactions that I receive from ordinary South Africans every day, whether I'm in a mall or in any public space, and from many South Africans who happen to have a way of sending messages to me, the messages that I get from them are amazing. The sentiments that you have expressed about the commission, I can assure you that they are shared by very, very many ordinary South Africans. Of course, a very great number of the South African population is Christian. So there are lots of people who say, we are praying for you. But there are a lot of other people who express support for the commission. And all of these messages give us the courage to go on with the work of the commission. I just hope that all South Africans, including organizations of different types, will appreciate that the work of this commission may entail, or actually does entail, that certain truths be told, and that we as South Africans tell and seek and tell certain truths about what has been happening and what is happening in our country, because if we don't allow people to come forward and tell the truths, tell what they know, and without fear of victimization, without fear of being marginalized, when we allow people to do that, we give this commission a better chance to do a good job. And if this commission is able to do a good job because people are allowed to come without fear to tell the truth, to tell what they believe is the truth, and they don't fear that they'll be marginalized in any way by sections of society, by certain organizations, and they know that they will be seen as doing their best for their country to make a contribution to the finding of solutions to some of the problems in our country. If everybody was given that space to know that they will be viewed in that way, then the work of this commission will be much more easier. And so I hope as we move forward that more and more people who come forward will be viewed by South Africans as genuinely wanting to contribute to the work of the commission and to the work of the country, and that if they might say things that other people might not like, what they say must be viewed as their own honest way of making a contribution to the country finding solutions to its problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You are excused.
Thank you.
Yes, the legal team, Mr. Pretorius.
Before we adjourn, Chair,
Ms. Hogan, if you like, you can move to sit elsewhere, so that, yeah, okay, all right. But if you are going to, you are still comfortable, you can sit because we won't be too long. It's up to you.
there are a few matters that need to be dealt with. The first is to place on record that there were two witnesses who had been contemplated as being the next witnesses, but the persons responsible for leading those witnesses have requested that they be not called at this stage, pending further investigations. In relation to Ms. Mentor, who was due to return on Friday, again, we have been requested to put before you, and it has been discussed with you, that she will not come on Friday. There are further investigations that need to be completed in order to allow her witness statement and her evidence to be finalized once and for all on her return. In relation to the application which is before you,
Just on Ms. Mentor, are the lawyers for implicated persons, are they aware of what is contemplated?
as soon as you make your ruling, they will be notified immediately. I've discussed it with the Commission's attorney, and he is ready to do so.
Well, isn't the proper thing to have that discussion with them before a ruling is made?
Well, DCJ, as I understood our arrangement in Chambers, the arrangement was that the evidence would be deferred to later in the month and implicated parties would be notified.
Yes, no, that certainly is what is contemplated, but I understood and I thought I said we shouldn't have a situation where we have another complaint that somebody was ready to come here and the evidence of a decision was taken that Ms. Mentor should not be here on Friday without them knowing anything.
Well, then perhaps we should reconvene tomorrow so that that notice could be given.
Yeah, let's rather do it that way. I think that's the better way.
And there's, I believe Mr. Manyu wishes to address you, but before that, Chair, can we, as also contemplated in Chambers, deal with the application before you made on behalf of Mr. Nene?
Yes.
Now, this application is not brought by the evidence leaders. It is brought by the legal representatives of Mr. Nene and Mr. Nene himself. If, again, Chair, it was contemplated that given the contents of the application, it would be brought in Chambers, and then you would announce your decision for public consumption. Again, I'm quite prepared to arrange for the legal representatives of Mr. Nene to attend to tomorrow morning. They are available, I've checked. Otherwise, as suggested in Chambers, we might just deal with the application now.
Well, if we are going to come in anyway tomorrow morning for the other one, and Mr. Nene's lawyers are not here but can be here tomorrow morning, maybe we should just deal with both tomorrow morning. What do you say?
That is a change of course, but that's entirely possible. And in case that was your decision, arrangements have been made for them to be available tomorrow.
Well, I guess the one can deal with it. I'm just thinking, you are not Mr. Nene's lawyer, and
no, sure.
and they are. The application is brought by Mr. Nene.
Perhaps that's more appropriate.
Yes.
If Chair, you feel that they should be here to speak to any issue that you may wish to raise, it's more appropriate that that be done.
Yeah. Okay, I think let's deal with it tomorrow morning, and then they can be here. I don't think that it should take much time.
No, it won't.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Thank you. So this matter will be dealt with tomorrow at 10 o'clock then. Thank you. Mr. Manyu wants to say something. Mr. Manyu, please come forward.
Morning, Chairperson.
Yes, Mr. Manyu.
Yeah, no, Chairperson, I just feel that I'm not getting a fair treatment in that, yes, on the 23rd was a scheduled date, and I got correspondence to say there's a gap today, and then I must come in today. And so I'm here today, and I'm very ready to table my version. Now, the input that Mr. Maleka gave to the chair, for the chair to decide the way the chair has decided, I think it gave a wrong impression in this way. What Mr. Maleka said when he was tabling the situation, he gave the impression as if I speak today, I will say something less than what I should have said on the 23rd, when in fact that's not the case. I am here, Chair, on two issues. I'm here to respond from a subpoena on a text I sent to Ms. Williams, and I'm also here to respond, to put my version on her testimony. So those are the two matters that I need to be responding to. The impression I'm getting from Mr. Maleka when we had a discussion here is that he has further questions and so on. I'm not understanding, Chairperson, what those questions should be, because I did not apply to cross-examine Ms. Williams. So therefore, I'm not expecting any cross-examination. So all I'm asking is an opportunity to place my version. I will not be any wiser from my side on the 23rd than I am today. So what I'm asking for today is to table what I would have tabled on the 23rd. I'm ready.
Well, Mr. Manye, let me just say this, that it is regrettable that at a time when an existing arrangement had been made in terms of which you were going to come and give evidence on the 23rd, you were contacted to say, come today. I think that is what has given the problem, because until you were contacted or until today, you knew that you were required on the 23rd, and I assume you were ready to come on the 23rd. But you were asked to come today on the basis that there is some space, you could come in, and you readily came, and then suddenly you are told you can't give evidence. I understand completely why you should feel that you are not being treated fairly. You probably dropped other things that you wanted to do, because the commission said there is a space, could you come? I have expressed my concern to the leaders of the legal team of the commission in regard to the fact that you were called for today, you were called to come in today. It would appear that there may have been some misunderstanding within the legal team. And there is a feeling that the issues that you would cover today, maybe it's issue, not issues, you have said it's two. I think Mr. Malega may have said his understanding was that you would cover only one issue today. But when he said that, I don't necessarily mean he thought you would not yourself be ready to cover whatever else. I think he may have been meaning that from the legal team of the commission, they may not yet be ready to canvass certain issues with you that they were planning to canvass on the 23rd. So my understanding is that from your side, you may or may not be ready to deal with everything that they have in mind. You certainly are ready to deal with everything that you have in mind should be dealt with. But apparently, they are not ready to lead your evidence and deal with your evidence as of today. So if my understanding is that there seems not to have been sufficient communication within the legal team, and that's why what happened. And so the problem is, the result is that there is some inconvenience to you, for which I suppose that the legal team would apologize. So there is a problem with hearing your evidence today because of that, and I think it's no fault on your part. But you want to say something?
Yes, Chair. Can I propose a compromise position, Chair? I think if the state of readiness of the legal team is not at the level of engaging with my input, can you not arrive at a compromise where at least they should be in a state of readiness to listen? I think, Chair, in fact, on the 23rd, I can come again on the 23rd. On the 23rd, they will be better informed of my version, because I would have put not only the written version, but also my oral submission. I think they'll be better informed. If they can't be informed, if what has been written to them has sparked questions and so on, which they want to ask and whatever, I'm saying, Chair, there's a chance that if I put my oral version, by default, I could deal with some of the issues that they're not clear about. And I'm still saying I'm also availing myself again on the 23rd, should there be any outstanding matter. But, Chair, I think let's also just understand that to prepare to come to a session like this is not something that you just wake up and do and you don't do. There's a psychological preparedness that you do, which I have, and I don't think it's fair that I prepare myself to come and deliver at the request of the Commission. By the way, Chair, I did this to accommodate the Commission because the Commission thought they had a gap, and I think you still do have a gap, Chair, because Mcebisi Jonas is not here. So what are we doing after lunch? So I could come back after lunch and table my presentation.
So I think maybe what I should do is take the lunch adjournment that may allow some discussion between yourself and the legal team to see what can be done in the light of your suggestion. Now, your suggestion is that maybe your evidence in chief be heard, and I'm not privy to what various issues are that the legal team is. I know there was a mention of a certain number of issues, which is certainly more than the two that you have discussed. Maybe we should, I should stand the matter down. Unless, Mr. Malega, you have another suggestion, I should stand the matter down and then maybe after lunch hear whether the discussions between the legal team and Mr. Manyi has resulted in anything. Let me hear what Mr. Malega has to say. Thank you.
Chair, my starting point is that whenever a witness is expressing a willingness to testify before you, whatever the circumstances, that witness should be afforded an opportunity to do so. Mr. Manyi tells you today that he is prepared to tell his story, and maybe you should afford him an opportunity to do so. But as and when he tells his story to you, we would like to test that story by asking him questions, not only on the matters that have been set out in his various statements, but all of those matters where his name and engagement in improper behavior and conduct has been mentioned. You know that his name has come up from a number of testimony given by a number of witnesses. And so, for example, to give you some perspective, Mr. Masako came here to testify, and he mentioned how he was transferred from GCIS to the Department of Public Works, and how Mr. Manyi was cross-transferred to become a head of GCIS. That is vital, a question that we would like to explore with him, because it raises a number of inappropriate or improper behavior. You heard Ms. Williams, who gave you chapter and verse about TNA. The Commission has managed to gather information through its own investigation about the conduct of Mr. Manyi in relation to those procurement. It's only fair that he should be given enough opportunity to prepare himself on that issue. But if he's willing to take the risk to testify without any preparation on that regard, we would explore that issue with him. You have also received evidence about the extent of revenue and payments that were made by a number of state institutions for the benefit of TNA. We would like to explore the knowledge of Mr. Manye in that regard, whether or not he has contributed anything in relation to the growth of the business of TNA. You would recall, I think it was Mr. Nene who gave evidence about the premise of the discussion he's had with Mr. A.J. Gupta, that the starting point of their discussion was that they did not do, at that point in time, any business with government. It is important to explore that issue with Mr. Manye to see whether or not he took part in the contribution of the growth of the business of TNA from government business. We would also like to explore with him what he experienced when the TNA and ANN7 business were sold to him. We would like to explore the business model of the business he purchased and what happened to that business when it no longer enjoyed government support. Because at the end of the day, if the questions we're going to explore with him in that regard show that TNA was vitally supported by government business, and when it failed because it no longer enjoyed the support of government business, all of the improper and inappropriate activities relating to its procurement of business vitally contributed to state capture. And those are fundamentally important questions which we would not like to explore on an ad hoc and piecemeal basis. They are vitally important, in fairness to him, that he should prepare himself on those issues. But Chair, it's up to him. If you want to explore those issues, we will trudge along, we will limp along, and we'll deal with them. So it's important for us, Chair, not to give the impression that we are not ready. We are ready, but we believe that he too should be ready to the extent that we're going to explore this issue, because he has now made himself available by virtue of the fact that Mr. Mabunda contacted him about a gap. We would want to make sure that you have proper documentation before you, which we're going to explore as and when we ask him questions in that regard. There is just a note which has just been given to me by my colleague, Ms. Norman. Can I read it? And if it's important, I may have to convey its message to you.
Yeah.
Chair, the note says that another issue that we would like to explore with him is his involvement in the interministerial committee that was constituted to deal with the allegation that the banks had inappropriately dealt with the bank closure of the Gupta-related accounts. You have had evidence of a number of witnesses in that regard, including Mr. Sinton, and it's an issue that we would like to explore with him.
I'll give you a chance, Mr. Manye. Yeah. Okay, all right. Mr. Manye, what I understand Mr. Maleka to be saying is that one of the benefits of leaving the arrangements as they were, namely that you come on the 23rd to give evidence, is that one of the benefits is that you would become aware of all the issues they want to ask you on, and therefore you would be better prepared to deal with them. But if you say you are ready on anything that they may be have wanted to ask you about on the 23rd, there is no problem. So their stance seems to be, well, if you feel that you would like to take the witness stand today, you, so to speak, waive any right to an opportunity to look at whatever issues, other issues they want to ask you about, then from their side, then that's fine.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I think this committee has made public how it operates. And what Mr. Maleka and the rest of the team here are doing, I think, is at odds with what has been communicated in terms of the operations of this committee, of this commission. It cannot be that when a person is on the witness stand, then that is an omnibus of anything that comes and so on. A person comes here either on invitation, on subpoena, to respond to a specific issue, or a person comes here on his own version or submission or what have you, and you get questioned on that. The reason I am here, Chairperson, is to respond to the issues that are directly facing me. And the one is a subpoena in terms of the text I sent to Pumla, and the other is to respond to the other issues that Pumla raised. That's what I'm here for. If there's anything else, for instance, on the Standard Bank matter, my response is on record in terms of that. I have not applied to cross-examine anybody.
Yeah.
Now, to be put on a witness stand, to be cross-examined when I have not, there's no permission to cross-examine me because I have not applied to cross-examine anyone. I am now being denied an opportunity to present my version on something that has been presented both in an affidavit and orally. And now I'm supposed to, I'm here to respond to that. Now I am told that no, not only that, whilst you're here, let's do this, whilst you're here, let's do this. It can't be fair. That is an unfair process, Chair. I think I should be allowed to table my version, and only questions that I should be answering are the questions directed at what I'm here to respond to. But it cannot be, I'm not running away, Chairperson. I'm in this country, I've got roots here. If I have to be subpoenaed for anything else that Mr. Malika wants to subpoena me for, I'm here for that, I'm ready.
Yeah.
But I should be given the opportunity to table my version, and I'm ready to answer any question related to what is on the table.
Yeah, maybe what we should do is the following. It is quite some time back that Ms. Williams gave her evidence and mentioned your name, and ordinarily it would have been preferable that you got a chance to respond or deal with that soon after she had given evidence, and not too far from when she gave evidence. Maybe what we should do is, maybe I should give you a chance after lunch to give your evidence in regard to what you want to say about the issues that you are ready to talk about. And leave the legal team to ask you questions if they want to ask you questions about what you are ready on, or to reserve their cross-examination and you come back on the 23rd and then they cross-examine or ask you questions. Maybe I shouldn't use the word cross-examine. They ask you whatever questions they want to ask on that day, but in a way, you get a chance today to say what you want to say in response to the allegations that you feel strongly about that were made.
Thank you, Chair.
You would be happy with that?
I'll be very happy with that, Chair.
Yes, okay, thank
Thank
you.
you, Chair.
Mr. Malega, what do you think of that? So in other words, we would take the lunch adjournment, then after lunch, we give Mr. Manyi the opportunity to say what he says. You may or may not lead him. He knows what he wants to talk about. Maybe you just say, the floor is yours. He deals with those issues, and when he has finished, if you have questions at this stage, you ask him. If you don't have at this stage and you want to reserve them for the 23rd, then we adjourn until the 23rd. Yes. What do you think of that? Then in that way, he gets a chance to say what he wants to say, but he will come back on the 23rd, and everything can still continue.
Yes, no, Chair, we would support that approach.
Okay. Maybe I should just check. Do you know whether you are likely to rather reserve all your questions for the 23rd, or you don't know yet?
Chair, I prefer to, to raise my questions in one session. But if you think I should deal with those matters he is prepared to speak on, then I can ask questions in that regard.
Yeah, I am easy. I think it's important, maybe it's important just to give him a chance to really deal with the allegations that he feels strongly about.
Yes.
And I'm quite easy, even if you were to say, may I not ask him any questions today, may I reserve all my questions for the 23rd? Or you say, I'll ask him only a limited number of questions now, others will be asked later. I'm easy, but in that way, he will have been given an opportunity to deal with what he feels very strongly about, and then we'll still continue on the 23rd.
Yes.
So it may be that it might not be a bad idea to not to ask any questions, and then we resume on the 23rd with him.
Yes. Chair, I'll confer with my colleagues to see what's the best option for us.
Yes.
And we can report to you after Mr. Manyi has testified.
Okay, no, that's fine. Then we are at 17 minutes to 2. Maybe I should just ask Mr. Manyi, how long do you think you would take if you were not to be asked any questions today? You are obscuring him, Mr. Pretorius.
Chairperson Amrita, I think I can do what I need to do within 1 hour.
Okay, no, thank you.
One further matter, please, Chair. I've been asked by Mr. Bloom to place on record that he was here or is here today, but that he will abide arrangements with the legal team in relation to his future attendance. He's perfectly willing to do so.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Thank you for future arrangements. Thank you. We are going to take that's an hour from now. Thank you.